Swales, When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast creator, producer, host, everything really. A podcast that was born out of my own lived experience of burnout and my desire to connect with people who were or are going through or have gone through burnout and share my own experience. And it's evolved from there to also having guests come on the show and for me to share professional wisdom as to how to navigate this thing we call burnout to help prevent, recover, and really transform and evolve so we don't get burnt out again. So this is When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. Please note that whilst my guests, some of us work in the burnout field and we are coaches, counselors, therapists in this space, that the information we do provide, the wisdom that we do share, cannot be tailored to meet your personal needs and should not be a replacement of going out there and getting personalized help and support from a professional in burnout for yourself. I can't stress that enough. And please, if you are finding you need immediate counseling, I really encourage to link with your a GP, a doctor, to help you with that. Here in Australia, we also have national telephone and online services, Lifeline 13114. And especially if there is any risk to yourself, if you're feeling suicidal, please contact your local emergency services, or national, I should say. Here in Australia, that is 000, and also Lifeline 13114. With that in mind, please sit back, or if you're someone who listens to your pod while exercising or your commute, whatever you're doing, I hope that you find this episode enlightening and supportive in your journey and your experience with burnout. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now. In episode 34, I interview Rowena Hicks, a woman with over 30 years experience in the educational field, which after her own brushes with burnout and compassion fatigue, pivoted her sights on helping other teachers prevent and heal from burnout. She has always been passionate about her work as a teacher, and particularly with working with vulnerable children and those with a range of additional needs. So this has seen her be a specialist teacher, special needs coordinator, and even a deputy head. And she has worked in the UK, Poland, East Africa, in orphanages, missionary schools, international schools, as well as secondary and primary schooling. So she has had a load of exposure to the challenges teachers face, as well as her own personal experience. And in this conversation with her, it all comes out. And I know there's going to be something for every teacher out there to gain from listening into this conversation, but also for anybody who is experiencing or working with people with burnout. It's definitely worth tuning in to Rowena's wisdom. So join us in this conversation, and please, if you like what you hear, follow, subscribe, hit like, review, comment. Love to hear from you. But enjoy the episode. Take care of you. Hi, Rowena, and welcome to the podcast. It's lovely to finally sit down and have this very vital conversation with you about teacher burnout. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. It was some time ago now that we sat down and met each other virtually, and decided to get you onto the pod and record this conversation, very vital conversation. So I'm so glad you reached out and we connected. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be here. So thank you.
You're welcome. So I think, starting off with a bit of getting to know you. So I have a few questions in mind, and just a bit of getting to know you on a personal level. So first of all, do you mind sharing with the listeners and watchers what your passions are?
Well, I guess the main passions for me is I've got 4 amazing children and they're all grown up. So the youngest is 20 now. So I guess being a parent, you never stop being a parent. And I thought, oh, maybe it would all get a bit easier, but it doesn't. It just gets more interesting and more fun. So they are probably my main passion in life.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. More fun, more interesting. That sounds like a whole other story I'd love to dive into, but we'll stay
Yes.
on track. Um,
Okay.
outside of work, what are the kind of things that you get up to outside of your work professional life?
So I have an amazing group of friends and I love going and doing things. I particularly like going outside to do things.
Um,
I love walking and swimming and things like that. And I also I'm part of a very, very active church. So I go for one or two services every Sunday, and I do a lot of things in the week connected to the church as well. So that is a very important part of me and who I am, and I guess my identity is based on Jesus. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing those aspects of you. And I got a little bit floored on the swimming, considering you're from the UK. So is that indoor swimming or
That's a great question.
curious?
I am a very I lived in Africa for 3 years, so the Indian Ocean is my happy place. But yes, so indoor swimming. Although I have to say, this year I did go into the water for about, I would say, 2.5 minutes in the south of England, but that was about it. It's so cold.
Oh my God. Indian Ocean. Wow. I don't think I've swum in the Indian Ocean. I don't think I've even seen it or flown
Oh,
over it
you
maybe
should.
because it's,
Absolutely beautiful.
yeah, Pacific side. So yeah, excellent swimmer. I grew up swimming as well. Swimming's in the blood. But I suppose being Australian, we pretty much all learned to swim pretty quickly, being here. Um, what kind of, maybe what are you currently reading or listening to? Because I know we all have varied, it might be music or a podcast or a book or even maybe a TV show or all the above. But what's yeah on your menu, I suppose, of those things at the moment?
Mm.
Mm.
It's a good question because I have a slightly guilty admission that I probably have about 7 books on the go at once. And I tend to sort of get about halfway through a book and then I'll start the next one and then I'll slowly finish. So I'm probably um, one of my favorites at the moment is Green Light by Matthew McConaughey,
Oh,
because I'm a journaling fanatic myself, but it's a lovely, easy way of sort of understanding. Actually, I love his movies anyway.
mm,
Um, and to see behind the scenes of a person is fascinating, really, the real person.
yeah.
I'm not very good reading just a plain novel for a novel's sake. I do occasionally read historical sort of stuff,
Mm,
but the other thing I'm a bit fixated with at the moment is High Performance Habits by Brendan Bouchard, because I
mm,
suppose because I'm trying to heal from past sort of burnout
mm,
myself, I'm having to work quite hard to change my thinking and my habits, and I'm finding that really helpful. But I am a movie aholic probably, and anything from sort of Pride and Prejudice up to sort of an action movie with Denzel Washington or Jason Statham or you name it, depending on which of my children particularly I watch things with, or my friends, I watch different genres.
oh, wow. Quite an eclectic mix there. And
Hmm.
such crossovers too in terms of my likes as well. Like I very much love the reading about the humans and have read, well, actually it was audio, The Green Light by Matthew McConaughey. Yep. Yeah, just peeling behind the scenes, getting to know the human that we see on the screen, but don't see, that human. I love
Yeah.
the human stories. So yeah, thank you for sharing those aspects of you. And just one more on the personal note, and then we'll get into, as you started to, talk to there too, with that book on, helping with build those healthy habits around your burnout experiences. And but first, just one more question: who and or what inspires you?
Um, well, I suppose my key inspiration would come from the Bible, from God. And interestingly, I'll look at some of these books by these inspirational speakers that Brené Brown and all these other Stephen Covey, all these others who I listen to a lot or read a lot about. And there's a lot of overlap with what's in the Bible about how to look after yourself. And so I suppose inspirationally, that is my core space about, learning to rest and learning about who is the best version of me and
Mm,
how to be that best version. And the more, I suppose, the thing is, I'm not as young as I used to be, obviously. And I've discovered that the older I get, the more I don't know. So
mm,
I'm on a massive learning journey. Not that I haven't always been, we're always learning, aren't we? But I feel like I'm on a really accelerated journey to
mm,
discover all, just discover more about everything, really. So
mm,
from an inspirational point of view, I suppose I would go back probably at the moment anyway to Brendan Bouchard, but just because he sort of he's so determined to be the best version of him, to be positive, but also to help all of us
mm,
to do that for ourselves and to be effective and efficient and to heal.
mm,
And it's not about being successful or anything like that for him. It's about looking inside yourself.
mm,
And I suppose that's why it resonates with me. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, it sounds like his definition of, well, and he doesn't, it sounds like doesn't pose it as success, but it's about learning and knowing yourself and developing and
Hmm.
growing yourself to,
Yeah.
yeah, like and I think that, well, that's how I deem success now. It's not about achieving something, but it's about knowing and connecting with myself and connecting with the world and the people
Mm,
and what I put out
mm.
there. And if I'm doing that in a way, that is yeah, aligned with my values, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing pretty all right.
Yeah, so
But still
it's
learning and
not the
growing.
worldly, it's not the worldly definition of
Mm,
success. And
mm.
that's so key for me. Yeah, from
Yeah.
my journey, really. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Well, if it's okay, if we pivot to the journey that you have been on, and and the term, I suppose, encompassing, and I know it doesn't necessarily encompass all, but burnout. Uh, if you can like share that part of your story, but like sort of starting with your profession, like where it all started, but like or wherever you'd like to start. But I always find that sometimes it's what we were doing, that led into that. Yeah, yeah. Or wherever you'd like to go.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've been in teaching for well over 30 years.
Mm,
And I've been a teacher and a specialist teacher and a master's tutor and a special needs coordinator. We call it a Senko in the UK.
okay.
And then I ended up as a deputy head. And I have to say, I've loved all my jobs. I've been into particularly a lot of schools that need improvement. And I've been part of a team usually going in to support that. So I mean, being a teacher is an intense, intense job anyway. Um, and I think I've learned over the years that I am a workaholic and I'm very driven. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Mm,
Um, and I'm not quite sure, 8 to 10 years ago, maybe, I went off sick with really intense back pain. And I was on morphine for about 6 months. And the doctors couldn't work out what was wrong. I've got wear and tear and things, but they were saying the pain is very strange. And no one suggested to me that it might be burnout.
mm,
And at the time, I got some help from a doctor in the States called John Sarno. He's now passed away, but he has written lots of books and people have taken over his work. And it was about mind body. That book, The Body Keeps the Score.
yeah.
And he talks about how our body, if you're internalizing everything and you're driven and overconscientious, all this sort of thing,
Mm,
it comes out somewhere in your body. And I read his book and did a lot of his courses, and my body healed. And still no one said that burnout word to me. So
mm,
I just went straight back into work, exactly the same. My kids were going, Mum, you're leaving work at sort of 5, you're leaving home at 5:30 in the morning, you're getting home. Some jobs were 7 or 8 at night.
mm,
And I loved what I was doing and I knew I was good at it and I was making a difference,
Mm.
but I still always needed to do more. It was like this desperate need to prove myself almost.
Yeah.
And the more tired I got and more my kids were saying, Mum, please slow down. And, you're getting sicker. And I started to get sort of minor things wrong with my body, I suppose.
Mm.
But I didn't stop to think about it until a couple of years ago when I found myself sitting in the car crying before I went into work one morning, just thinking, I don't know how I'm
Mm.
going to do this.
Mm.
And I thought I better speak to the doctor. Well, I couldn't get to speak to a doctor because I couldn't stop my work in the day.
Yeah.
Um, so it took a few weeks to get to the doctor, and they were going, "Oh, this really doesn't sound great. Um, there are warning signs here." And then one morning, I woke up thinking I was having a heart attack, and my daughter, my child, managed to get me the doctor on the phone who
Mm.
called an ambulance. And it wasn't a heart attack, it was a warning sign.
Mm.
And after 2 weeks, I launched myself straight back in again
Yeah.
to work. I was so engrossed in it that
Mm.
I didn't stop to think. And that is where I think we need to start working with, well, my world is teachers, but
Mm.
anybody to say, okay, we need to take a pause. If you're starting to have warning signs of something being out of kilter, out of balance.
Mm.
Anyway, it was a couple of months later that I actually I went to see the GP because the chest pain was so bad. I had numbness through my arms. I was losing vision regularly in one eye, all this sort of thing,
Yeah.
and felt really, really sick. And he said to me, actually, Rowena, either you resign or you're going to have a real problem on your hands because these warning signs are now quite extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And he pushed me quite hard to resign, bless him. He was absolutely right, because going off sick, especially in education, you feel such guilt that you're
Mm.
letting your team down. You have that shame and that, oh, it's impossible to heal being, well, it's really difficult to heal. I do work with teachers now who are
Mm.
working out how to heal while being off sick.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
feel like I'm an extreme case of ridiculous teacherness. But anyway, so I
Mm.
did resign. And it was at that point I realized quite how unwell I was. They went and did tests for all sorts of things like MS and things because my limbs weren't working. And sometimes I couldn't move my body at all.
Yeah.
So I then have since then been going through a process of learning how
Mm.
to recover from burnout
Mm.
and maybe how to help others so they don't do what I did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you. Like, I really hear that for you, before you even knew the term, your body, it was showing up physically.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things I've come to know about burnout. For some people, the signs that they notice first tend to be the body. But because if they don't have that knowledge base, or a health professional has that knowledge base of burnout, the chronic stress conditions, they don't make the connection. But yeah, it can show up in musculoskeletal issues. It can show, yeah, in so many ways, because as you know, the mind and body's connected. And if we're living under chronic stress, it's going to show up somewhere. And for you, it was quite physical and quite alarming. Those symptoms that felt like a heart attack, where often are that the stress, the
Mm.
chronic load, could be panic attacks even, but that constant elevation, our body's not designed to hold that much, so it comes out. Yeah. So you were going through that. Hi, it's just me. I hope you don't mind this very brief interruption to this episode that you're tuning into. I just wanted to let you know about a free resource that I have to help support your well-being at work. It's called the Build Your Wellbeing at Work workbook, where I share 5 key practices that you can implement every day to help prevent or even recover and grow from burnout. So on my shared screen there, you can see my website, which is www.burnoutpsychologysupport.com. You scroll down to the bottom of the page and you just enter your details there, first and last name and email, which then will subscribe you to the Burnout Psychology Support newsletter. So you'll be first to be informed of things going on in the services I provide, but you'll score yourself that free workbook. So thank you very much for allowing me to come in, drop in, but now back to your episode. Take care of you. Bye for now. At what stage did someone or yourself come across that word burnout in all of that? Because was that later?
I think it was the GP, the doctor, who told me first about it. Because I loved what I did, I was absolutely passionate about it. So it didn't cross my mind. Often you hear about people who aren't happy, and so it all goes downhill. But for me, I loved it more and more and more. So I was investing more and more into me, into my job, not into me. And
Yeah.
my children could say to me, Mum, we're really worried about what's going on here. And my friends were going, hold on a minute, but I couldn't see it. And no one mentioned that word to me. It was definitely after, speaking to the doctor, and it was him.
I think it's so important what you've shared about your experience there, because it's not necessarily everybody's experience of burnout. So it shows the uniqueness that, yeah, we kind of don't put that together when we're loving what we're doing. Like it's a passion project, we're enjoying it. And I really see that even in your body as you talk about it, so we don't associate enjoying our work, enjoying what we're doing, being passionate about it, and burning out. We don't necessarily think those things should go together. But when we think about it from a body point of view and what our body can hold and handle, it does make sense, because we're not a machine. But we don't think that way when we're, it's just not in our repertoire at the time. But this forced stop, and it sounds like you're very grateful for your doctor because it was very hard for you to stop, even with your body giving fully stop. Like, you took breaks, but as you said, as a teacher, and you see this across the teachers you work with, you can't fully have a break, because your mind is still on the job, concerned and feeling guilty of not being there, letting your team down, feeling shame around that, which I can concur with other professions as well, particularly helping professionals like teachers. Most of us have that kind of, team. We want to support our team, we want to support our clients. And when we're away from that work, we can be battling with that mind around those things. So we don't truly heal. So that forced stop. Yeah. And you said that was when you started to notice how bad things had gotten. And I was just curious, I know you've talked about the impact on your body. What did you start to notice was the impact there? What was happening for you? If you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, I guess, I wasn't really sleeping because I know a lot of teachers, and I don't know if this is in other professions as well, they dream and they think about work even when they're sleeping and also when they're resting. So when they're resting or trying to rest, they feel guilty that they're not working, because you can never do enough. So I think in starting to recover, it was trying to learn what rest actually means, because I started by just resting, which for me is just sort of stopping doing work. And I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do that. And rightly or wrongly, I sat down and wrote a book, which I found incredibly healing in itself, because it helped me to sort of put down some of what it was like and some of the strategies that I had helped other people with. Because I think one of the reasons that I burnt out maybe so hard is that I saw those around me who were struggling so badly, because in the UK, and I know it's in other countries too, teachers are on their knees. So I spent an awful lot of time trying to support the teachers to be working in better ways for them, to be more effective and strategic and that sort of thing.
Mm.
And so I think the compassion fatigue was there. But
Yeah.
in doing that, I forgot to look after me. So when I then stopped,
Mm.
I didn't know how to, um, yeah, I didn't know how to look after me. I didn't know what that looked like. How do you heal when you're so used to doing, to rescuing, to being useful? How
Mm.
suddenly do you, in this stoppage space, how
Mm.
how do you heal? How do you stop your brain from feeling sort of insignificant and useless, and that shame of suddenly having no impact, not bringing in a salary, not being useful to anybody, um, and actually in the worldly terms that we brought up earlier, you
Mm.
know, where do you fit because you've got no sort of belonging or
Oh,
success or value even, and how
yeah.
does that work?
Wow. So you're in that stoppage. This was all what was coming to you, and
Mhm.
you're having to deal with in your process of healing, like learning how to rest, learning how to look after each other, learning to be able to find a way when you no longer had that connection to your sense of belonging in the world and meaning and richness through what you were doing as a
Yeah.
teacher. Like, and I can certainly concur that, not to say that everyone who burns out will have all of that, but definitely a lot of those elements. And I know you, because working with teachers, you see it in other teachers, but definitely see it in other professions as well, particularly again the helping professions, because I think
Yeah.
a certain type of person tends to end up working in that industry. We tend to be the doers, we tend to be the self-sacrificers, the people pleasers, the perfectionists, the, wanting to help others out. Yeah, all of those things, and feel, and haven't been nurtured in a way, or even given space in a way to know how to do that, to take care of ourselves. It's all
Yeah.
others. So yeah, in our healing process, it's all, oh crap, now I need to learn how to do this whilst my mind is still attached to all of this stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I was, curious, because you're starting to talk about it, the things that you were facing, that the toll, and what you were having to face throughout your healing. What are some of those things that you found supported, or is helping you? I mean, you mentioned you writing your book was something that, whilst it was, helping others, it also helped you. So those things that help are and have helped you in your healing process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so in through the burnout, I have some friends have grown stronger and some have fallen away because some people get it, and my journey of healing, if you like, and
Mm,
me becoming a new me.
mm,
Um, so, but putting time into relationships has been absolutely crucial for me,
mm,
and those connections in the healing process, and being able to be honest and vulnerable, and I think that vulnerability and me being able to say, oh, okay, I don't know how to do today with nothing in my diary, and to be able to feel that I am still a valued member of society, even if
mm,
I'm not apparently contributing anything obvious in
mm,
my day.
mm,
So how do I come to terms with that for myself, but also work through that with friends and
mm,
some family? And some family get it and some don't. And you have to love them anyway.
mm.
We're all, but it's also
Oh,
putting things, sorry.
I was just going to say that's beautiful. That I always think of, like, it's that acceptance of others with where they're at and their capabilities, rather than
Mm,
getting caught up in being angry or resentful, or at their, not their their capacity to be able to care for you in a way that you need. Yeah, I just think that's such a great place, because that's often something that I'm working with clients with, around that social, the connections, and their feelings that come up when in their important relationships where they're not understanding or reacting in the way that they need. Yeah, it's the social aspects are a big part. Yeah, relationships are a big part, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And also surrounding yourselves with people who want to go on that journey with you to help you to learn and to grow, rather than people who perhaps like the old version of you, which was a little bit needy because you were so exhausted. But actually, when you become stronger and more determined to do life better, then you need to surround yourself with people who want to go on that journey with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something you did. Yeah, and it meant saying goodbye. Like there's some relationships that have ended and others that have grown or developed or are new. Yeah.
Yeah.
As
And that's
you've grown and
okay.
developed. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's okay. That
Yeah.
acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But sorry, there I mean you also mentioned, what was important in your road to recovery and you adapted and adopted is being authentic, being vulnerable, being true, and allowing that. And that's such a big piece. So hard to do, so important to do, and such courage that it takes to go there. So I admire everyone on that journey and going there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would just say a little warning on that one, that as we said, some people will get that and other people will push against it. So I've been called a burden. And, you know, that is really hard to hear. And I would say you've got to be a little bit resilient. If you're prepared to be vulnerable, there is courage in that. And you've got to be prepared for some people to actually push against that. And then you let them go, as we talked about,
Yeah.
and you move to the ones who are prepared for you. I'm not saying that you become a drain, because, that's not what life's about, is it? Because relationships have to be reciprocal. But if you are going to be vulnerable with people, choose maybe a bit carefully who you are vulnerable with, and choose those ones who are going to love you back and be compassionate and caring. And then you can care for them too. So do you know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, and I'm sure that as well, the audience, no, definitely. That's so harsh, and I do hear that a lot. I know that's something that played in my brain, not that anyone said that to me, but I felt I was holding that belief I was a burden. But like you were saying, some people are not going to be able to hold that space of your vulnerability. Often feel like that sometimes comes from a place of people not able to hold their own vulnerability, and so they're not able to hold others. So it's often says more about where they're at, and that's okay. I mean, it's a hard place to be, but you have that choice, to move, to pivot, and not be with that person if they can't be. And like you said, it's reciprocal. Like, you're there for them, they're there for you. And just when, as I like to say, Australian colloquial term, but shit hits the fan, you might need to be more, leaning on others than them leaning on you. But relationships, ebb and flow, go through, everything changes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that has really helped me is because of the ups and downs of feeling the guilt and the shame of having let my team down. I mean, I still feel that 2 years on. I have to get outside every day and I have to do exercise, whether it's just a walk. I'm in England, so a lot of rain, or if it's going for a swim in a indoor pool or whatever it happens to be, I have to get out and do that every day because it's so important for me. I think it's partly having some space and some time for my mind to unravel a little bit, but it's also that I think the power of exercise and being outside as well is huge.
Oh, thank you for sharing that part of your healing journey as well. Definitely part of mine too, and a lot of people, and sharing that with others, just for the very reason you mentioned, can give our mind that space to unravel, but in a environment where, when you're out in nature, nature has I feel like it's like the comforter blanket, just naturally, or walking, because we're getting the adrenaline pumping through our body, which is a natural, resistant to cortisol, stress hormone. So it, a mind going off and doing those really horrible things, making us feel guilty or whatever, whilst walking or whilst out in nature is different to being indoors, dark, lonely. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, sharing that part. In your healing journey, because it sounds like, and this is so much part of most people's healing journey, we learn so much about ourselves, but also about what got us there too. And it got us to the place, of burnout, and compassion fatigue, as you mentioned too, which is often a big component of helping professionals who burn out. It's often that empathy. We've just got nothing left. We've just given so much passionately, and we want to, but it's just we're a body, and empathy is not a finite resource. It will run out. But coming back there, like, we learn so much, and sometimes we learn about those patterns of behaviors that have contributed. And I know you've shared a lot about that already, but I was just wondering if you could, those learnings about what causes it for you, what contributes, has contributed to your burnouts. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of Dr. McLeod, but he's written a book on boundaries. And
Oh yes, I
I've read
have.
it.
Actually, it's up there.
Yeah, it's red and
Start and
white.
finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I love it. I
I've
read
read
it.
it
Yeah.
so many times. And I can't say no in work. So that's a massive issue for me. I remember a colleague said to me, I was a deputy head in a very big school, and she said to me one day, Ro, why did you reply to that email that went to the whole team? Why do you feel you need to do that? She said, because what she does is she deletes it. If she doesn't have to do the work, she deletes it. Whereas I feel like I have to come back with something, or have an idea, or look into some solution for it. Because for some reason, boundaries are a real issue for me. And wonderfully, one of the things I do now is I help, obviously, teachers who are going through possible burnout, and I work with them. And so in helping them and in researching it, I'm helping myself, because I'm learning all the time, what does it mean to say no? And recently I did this with someone, and they'd offered to help me with something. And I'd thought about it, and I knew they were busy, but I thought, no, they'd offered. So I went and asked for that some help. And the when I said, could you do this? They kicked back very hard at me. How am I going to do this? I'm so busy. And actually, because I'd prepared myself, I said, well, you did offer to help. And so I'm asking you to do this part of it. And I stuck to it. And the sense of freedom I had, that even I had managed to put in a boundary and to stick with what was best for me, was so freeing. But I'm having to learn, like a child almost,
Oh
how
yeah.
to put in a boundary.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly hard, but incredibly freeing when I managed to do it.
Oh, thank you for sharing that experience, because I know, oh God, people out there who'll be going through that same struggle, of not being able to say no, and hearing that experience and hearing the truth of that experience too. It's hard, and it is, but it's freeing. And just even you saying that, I can see that again, the body should, like it, yeah, so freeing. God, and I know people will want to feel that, but we get stuck in the discomfort that does come, with doing that as well, to start with, because we're a kid, like you say, we're almost like an infant learning their skill. I sometimes refer, depending on where I'm at, my skill level with different things that I'm learning, I refer to my age. I'm like, I'm about a toddler in this, or I'm like an adolescent stage now. It helps me, but I think it also helps the other person sort of know where I'm at too. Where it's relevant to them. So when you said
I
that,
love that. I
yeah.
just love that. I think the other thing where I am quite a toddler on is that I'm learning about, is to watch my response to people, because they're responsible for their response, but I'm responsible for how I respond, and we have a choice. So in particularly in school, you're constantly bombarded with stuff. Might be a child, might be a colleague, might be a parent, might be a leader, it doesn't matter. And we have a choice how we're going to respond to each of these. So part of my journey of healing has been to learn that we don't have to respond in a way that pleases the other person. We have to be gentle and kind, and that's very important to me. But also, we can be quite firm, and we can say, if someone asks you to do something and you're completely overloaded already, you
Mm,
can say, let me think about that. Or
mm,
I really don't think I can do that this week, but I'll look at it next week if there's a chance of it. Or I'm really sorry, but that doesn't fit into my day's plan at the moment. I just don't see where that's going to work. And
mm,
it's about learning how to respond rather than taking it inside yourself, going into a complete sort of internal dialogue of shouting, screaming, overwhelm, and
mm,
actually internalizing then stress and saying, oh, okay, I'll do it if I can. I'll do it. I
mm,
suppose I have. You actually might have to say, I'm really sorry, I can't do that.
mm,
And it's
mm.
about learning how to respond in a more mature way. And I should have learnt this years ago, but being such a people pleaser, it's really a massive learning curve, that one.
Yeah, and when we're on that trajectory of, you're working and you're on all those projects and stuff and you're passionate, when is that time or space to sort of reflect where you're at with what often gets called the soft skills, but I think are the most important skills, those, personal skills that help support us in our environments, in our world, like boundary setting, and often skills that we haven't had instilled in us or demonstrated or supported in those early parts of our life for whatever reason. There's various reasons, but as an adult we can use. But I think often we're so caught up in the busy of life, where's that space to stop and reflect on that, until the body tells you, and then your GP tells you, and then you're like, and then you
Mhm.
courageously took, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do the healing, I'm gonna do the work, and that's what you've been doing since. And at the same time, whilst helping you, still keeping that light alive in terms of that. I refer to the light in terms of that passion, that importance, what your sense of helping others as well, whilst also helping you. And I wanted
Mm.
to pivot, but I know they have such crossovers, to your own personal story of burnout and healing and growing from that. But the work that you do and that you have been mentioning with helping other teachers, uh, and was something you were even doing in your work prior to completely burning out yourself. I mean, you were in the throes of burnout, but you were helping teachers where you could there too. But can you tell us a bit more about that space of your work with teachers and what that looks like, what you're doing there? Because I know you mentioned a book and I have read it as well. But
Thank
I'll
you.
leave you to talk to about it. Yeah, about your work.
Yeah, so I wrote a book called Teach, Flourish, Thrive, and it's really break free from burnout. And it's just an introduction, really, to some skills if you're feeling overwhelmed as a teacher. Interestingly, a social worker has read it, and a physio, and a nurse, and a business person, and a GP. They've read it and said, we need this for our professions as well, because it's just general strategies, really small, simple strategies to put in place that you can read for 5 minutes and try something today, read for 5 minutes, try something tomorrow, just to
Mm,
see if there are things, just little keys like, for example, I don't know, you've read the book, but people listening might not know,
mm,
apparently 95% of us think we are self-aware.
mm, mm,
And that's, for me, that's really interesting, because I thought I was quite self-aware, but in fact, the reality is 15 or 10% of us actually are self-aware.
mm,
And that's a real shock for me, because that means that actually I'm probably not as self-aware as I thought I was. And
mm,
so it's about it's such a key thing to learn about. And one of the keys in it is if you have a difficult meeting, let's say, you don't say, oh, why did that go so wrong? And why did she say that? Rather, you say, what could I have said differently? Or what could I have done differently in that meeting to make it go better? So
mm,
you're on this learning, improving, rather than sort of going into a meltdown about it. You're very proactive and taking some positive steps. So it's full of little steps like that, the
mm,
book of looking, are you a drain? Are you a radiator? It's got some research in it, but it's also quite full of stories and things, because I once a teacher, always a teacher, I suppose. So I've got a book that I've just put onto Audible, actually, which is quite
Oh, fabulous. Sorry,
interesting
I
to
love
listen to.
Audible. I
Yeah,
love Audible. Is this so I can
yeah,
consume knowledge a lot better through? So well done. I'd love to do that with my book one day as well.
you
So
should. You
I
should, because
will.
your book is has really, really helped me, I have to say.
But I think that
Um,
accessibility, I think that's really awesome that you've put your book into that too, because what I loved about your book, even though I'm not a teacher, and just hearing that you had other audience as well, very relatable. But what I really loved about your book, and I particularly love about any stories I read about people overcoming adversity, is the story, like your personal story, the wisdom that you've gleaned and now share, which I just loved how you blended the two, the story and the practical. So your reader can, like, and I loved how you put it before, they can read it, sit down. And especially when we're talking about burnout, and if they're still working, we need a book like that, that we can just come back to, but we can get something quite quickly that we can put into practice. Because yeah, and that one tool can make the difference. But I just love the whole blend, and the fact that because the stories are real and you're teaching, just how I hear a lot from professionals that they love to hear from professionals in who have been through burnout, professionals in their industry. It Yeah, it just really helps. So to have a teacher out there who's done that, I think that's amazing.
mm,
I can
mm,
refer them to your book.
thank
Because
you.
yeah, I mean, even though there's crossovers, just reading another teacher's burnout story rather than a psychologist's burnout story can really help that teacher being a teacher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope so. The interesting thing was, at my book launch, teachers came and they were saying, "We love the idea of this, Row, but we're so busy and worn out and overwhelmed with life that we haven't got the time to do it, to
Mm,
read it." So, I've got a course online
yeah.
that teachers with just bite-sized teachings in it and things like that. But I also have a Facebook group, but I think teachers are so busy and overwhelmed that until
Yeah.
they start to stop and understand that they they need to invest in themselves, and even if that means for 10 minutes you're not marking a book or you're not preparing for the next day, unless you're investing in yourself a bit, you're
Mm,
never going to be the best version. You're never going to be the most energetic, the most creative, the most productive, because
mm,
then you've got to put some time into yourself in order to be a better version of you. And I wish I'd known this and understood it earlier,
mm,
because the irony is that if you don't invest in yourself, you're going to be more worn out, less productive, less creative. So
mm,
a small amount of investment can reap huge rewards. And really, the message for me would be for school leaders:
mm,
you need to hear this for your team. And
mm,
maybe that is in, putting something into weekly staff meetings, or encouraging some daily investment opportunity for your teachers, because then they're going to be more productive and they're going to be
yeah.
happier and more creative, and it's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. But it's the irony of how we live, isn't it? The fast
Yeah.
pace.
Oh, yeah. And I'm glad. Hi there. A small intrusion to share with you my book, Nothing Left to Give. I know it comes up in the show sometimes, so I wanted to share with you a little bit about this book. So this is the book that I wrote, well, basically the journals I kept while I was burnt out and made the commitment to overhaul my life in order to undo the very things that got me burnt out in the first place. So perfectionism, people pleasing, very good at nurturing others, but not myself, or allowing others to nurture me, just to name a few. And I've also included the practices that I like to call wellness practices that supported me along the way to getting better. So I hope my story at least helps you not feel so alone in this, and helps you along the way. So available on Amazon, but other online retailers as well. I'll leave the link to where you can purchase the book in the show notes. Thank you for allowing me to abruptly and rudely interrupt your episode, but now back to the episode. Take care of you. I'm glad you're mentioning that, because that was, one of the questions around more of that organizational, systemic, team-based kind of support. How can we make changes there to help the teachers be able to invest in themselves, to have the time and space to do that? But the irony is that often the same thing that keeps us in that cycle and pushing the systems that are run by humans who do the same. It's the push, like, to be productive, we just got to keep doing, but the research is there. I'm not sure if you've come across this yet, but most likely have, that they've done the numbers, they've done the economic research, and it's clear there that if you make systemic changes that invest in your employees, that will come back money-wise. They'll come back in productivity, just with what you said there. We're our best version of ourselves when we are well. So the work we do, it might be, let's say, 6.5 hours today, but the work we can do in that, when we have 1.5 hours doing something completely different, maybe, fun team building exercise, going for coffees or something, I don't know. But, that 6.5 hours compared to if we were jamming 8 hours of work, and the quality is, the quantity is different, but the quality is the same, or worse, maybe, the numbers, I don't know if that's making sense, but that's the something I come back to. But there's, just like it takes for the individual to change and work on investing in themselves, I think our systems are on that change. Hopefully some of them. I know in Australia we have some changes happening that is moving systems to make changes that will help and support the employees. Not so much in the teaching, unfortunately, that's still behind and they're still just pushing them to the grind. But in other industries, they're really taking that on board and realizing it's a good investment for them financially to invest in their employees, allowing this off work time within work, or that balance. But so sorry, long-winded, but that systemic issues, because you're working with teachers and knowing what and you are one, knowing what they've come up against, have been one. What are some of the things that you think could be helpful, that or that you've seen that is helpful?
I think a lot of teachers go through their day feeling unseen and unvalued. And there is definitely a leadership requirement here, but it's also a requirement on us as teachers to discover our value without needing to be told. So, but again, there's a learning journey there about seeing your impact and taking the win from all of that. But it does need to be, so let me give an example. I had about 100 staff in a room, and I said to them, write down what your core competencies are, what your most valued strengths are, your 3, let's say 2 or 3. And, let's say for me, it would be kindness and integrity. And then go and give a sticky note to maybe the 3 staff that you work with the most closely, and say what you value about what they contribute, their strengths, their competencies. What do you value? And for the team, they were so shocked. People came and said to me, Rowena, you're the most amazing problem solver. You're calm in a storm. And it made me really think about what I contribute as a team, what I can give. And then we could look at the team and say, what is missing in our team? We've got nobody here who's a strategic thinker, let's say. And then we need to either work on that or adjust the teams around and things like that. But to do something like that with your team is incredibly empowering, because we don't tend to say to people, wow, Shannon, you are just amazingly kind. And that, for us as a team, that gives us, you're the one who nurtures us all, let's say. We don't
Mm,
say that. We say, oh, Shannon, I could really have done with you stepping up today when I was struggling with that child. You didn't step in and, or you did step in, but, da, da.
mm,
We're not very good at doing that. So for people
mm,
to start thinking about their strengths and what they value in themselves and what they value in their colleagues brings a whole different team
mm,
dynamic. And it's to start the well-being impact of that for a school is huge, but we don't tend to do well-being in that sort of way. We do
mm,
well-being in, right, you need to sit and meditate for 5 minutes today, which
mm,
I have to say is really valuable,
mhm.
incredibly valuable, but it's one small aspect
Yeah.
of improving um, the 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 thrivingness of a school, if you like.
Yeah, like because like things like meditation, exercise, like whilst it's very useful and helpful for our individual well-being, it's not that collective well-being because we're all working well, a lot of us are working in teams, and even if it is quite individual work, there's still a team there. It might be reception and other, but
Yeah.
that I'm just thinking about my work, GP refers to me, and then I mean, not that I have admin, but I used to, like, there's still a team, but that interaction of the team, but how we interact, and that example you just gave, which we're not, you acknowledge, and yeah, I totally agree, and have seen that we're not very good at being that a more growth mindset. Like there's what you notice and identifying the strengths in another and communicating that. We tend to focus on the deficits, and that can make a huge change on a collective, because that feels bloody good when you receive that, right? Like I thankfully surround myself with those people more these days, and it felt very strange to start with because I wasn't used to it. I was like, oh, people either didn't say anything at all, but it's so good for the soul, and doing the same for others, to my best. Yeah, don't always hit the mark, but try. But yeah, what world of difference that would make, to even communicate in that way on a more regular basis. Would do amazing things. Wow, that's really cool. Collective
Mm.
communication. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it triggered from a teacher said to me once, so I've just had an observation, and they said these two things that were good about the lesson and this one thing. And she says, I'm so worried about this one thing, and all I can think about. And when we are told some good and some bad, all we take away is the bad. And it's not even bad, it's a learning point usually, but
Mm,
that's all we hear. And
mm,
that's where our brains go naturally.
yeah,
So it's about perhaps turning the talk and the narrative a little bit and looking at our strengths and working with them. And
yeah,
actually, the research shows that if you're not using your strengths, your really valued strengths in your workplace every day, you're going to really struggle to feel that you are valued and of worth. So you need to be
yeah.
more aware of your strengths as well.
Yes, I really love as you shared, your experience, but also and your experience with helping others, and what you've noticed in the teachers you've worked with in the industry, is that this coming back to the teacher, like coming back to the person, um, acknowledging, of course, the systemic challenges and what impacts them, but and the reason I like that is because we have control of ourselves about how we choose to act towards ourselves and others. And if we got, so fused with the system and all the failings there, it can lead us to feel even more out of control because it's not within our power to change right now. I mean, certainly we can use our voices, we can advocate, we can, not saying don't, but I love that there's this coming back to you, and yeah, because that's where we have control. Like, is my values aligned with my work? If not, then okay, can there be changes there, or do I need to move schools, or because yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen that um in the research, that one of the contributing factors is when there's a values mismatch, and that values mismatch, that's related to the system and ourselves, but it can be with ourselves. We can be totally off track and not aligned with what brings us richness and meaning and purpose in our job and our role. Yeah. So that's a really important thing that you've noticed. Yeah, to help them with. Is it just, I just want to make sure that, you're gleaning your wisdom. And I suppose we could talk for hours to get everything that you have, but just on that, helping others, other teachers and what you're learning there. Is there anything else from that space, that, in terms of what you're noticing is helping the teachers, or maybe other things that they're facing that's impacting them? Could be internally or systemically. Just, yeah, anything else, in that area?
I think probably I was told by a really senior lady in education recently. She's so impressive. I can't tell you. We all flock to whenever she's doing training and all this sort of thing. And I was having a coffee with her recently. She said, every time I go into these places, I feel inadequate and like I'm an imposter, and that I'll be found out, that I'm not good enough. And it made me realize that what most of us probably in the whole of life never feel that we're good enough at what we do. We're always feeling inadequate. That thing of imposter syndrome is very real. And I think it's rare if you don't feel that. And probably there's a humility attached to it, which is quite healthy. But at the same time, there's a striving that comes because of it. And I think as teachers, because workload is so enormous, you can never do enough unless you have that attitude of oh gosh, my lesson didn't really go very well today and the kids just really didn't seem to get it. I'm going to try it differently tomorrow. We're going to see if we can do better. Unless you can have that sort of attitude, rather than, oh gosh, that really didn't go well today, I'm going to beat myself up about it all day because I was a failure. So which way are you going to go? So it really is that mindset of, we're going to have ups and downs every day. We're going to have good days and bad days, but tomorrow's a new day. Just because I think the workload is so enormous that, and you can never finish it. It's not the sort of job where you can say, I've finished my to-do list. On we go. You don't. It's not that sort of job in teaching. Because children are movable feasts, whether you're a leader at the top of a school or a new teacher or teaching assistant, just starting up. And I think that the most helpful thing that I ever learned that worked the best for me was start your day with the worst job. So I used to do that thing that I'd been putting off the longest, because certainly for me, if I did it at 7 a.m. when I first came into school, before I opened my emails or whatever, I would do that assessment I needed to do, or that evaluation or whatever, because it doesn't take as long if you don't have the distractions of people coming in. You're before everyone else is there. So I would always do the first job worst, and that was the biggest help for me, I would say. But it is all about mindset, isn't it? At the end of the day, are you going to beat yourself up, or are you going to think, okay, that didn't go so well, or I didn't respond very well to that parent. Okay, tomorrow I have to apologize. I'll move on and I'll do better next time.
No, the mind has got so much to say about burnout, because it's what I use the term fusing because I'm a trained acceptance commitment therapist. So that's a term they often use, but it's a term they use for that we attach to certain thinking processes. And sometimes we don't even know we're attached because it's just so automatic. But if we follow that train of thought, it becomes our mindset. So learning to defuse, to shift our attention away from that thinking, apply a different thinking, that over time, that mindset that, as you've been describing, like, seeing a day that goes wrong, a lesson that goes wrong as a learning opportunity, that will become more of your thought process. But it takes time to shift that mindset, and very conscious and purposeful action, as you shared. But that mind, because I think and I was just talking about this to someone the other day, that, that often burnout, a big cause of it is what we're attaching to in our heads. If we've constantly got the critic on, if we've constantly got the warrior on, if we the one worrying about if the things aren't going according to plan, or the planner or the analyzer, but it's constantly on and never giving you a bloody break like mine was, that takes a lot of energy away and can deplete that. That's an extra workload on the workload you already have in front of you as a
that's key.
Yeah. So if we can work, and there's so many, which is so great, that this is where coaches, counselors, psychologists, our mental health professionals out there who have that wisdom on helping people deal with that mind and that mindset to shift some of those things like the imposter syndrome, the perfectionist, which is so common in people who burn out, and common in helping professionals. It just is, yeah. And I hope I being clear to the audience, I put teachers in there, anyone who's helping, educating, I put them under, or sometimes I call them caregiving professionals as well. Like but there's this care, this compassion that goes out, this, you're working with others, you're helping support them from a very emotional, mental, physical level as well. Yeah. But hey, like if, and I imagine how does one get in contact with you if they want to know and delve into your work a bit more, get access to your book, of course? How do they go about that, Rowena?
Well, I have a website, a website called rowenahicks.com. I've got a Facebook group, Preventing Teacher Burnout. Or just message me. I'd love to have a chat. My passion really is my happiest point in my day is when I'm speaking to teachers who are struggling, or anyone in education really who's struggling, because that's my heart. I don't want you to go where I went, and there's so many things that people can do to prevent it or to reduce the likelihood. But it might take a bit of work, but that's my heart really. I just think I just want to say to everybody out there that if you're listening to this and either someone who's in the place of struggling, or if you're struggling yourself with overwhelm and you're on survival, and you have such value. We all have such value and such worth. And it's not okay to think that you've got to do better, you've got to be better, you've got to be somebody successful in order to have that worth, because you have worth intrinsically because you are you. And that really is, until you, and this is my journey myself, until you understand that you have worth just by being you. You don't need to do something to be more worthy. You are just worthy as you. Until you understand that, you can't be the best version of you, and to discover who that really is. And that is, I suppose, that is my journey, and that is my message to people out there. That is my heart. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Rowena. I feel like that's a really great place to finish on. Such a really important message that teachers and everybody can take that is listening to this. It's very powerful, very important. And I will leave in the show notes Rowena's contact details, her website, so you can, and links to her book, so you can jump on there. And as Rowena said, she loves to have a chat and loves to connect. So please do. But I want to just thank you from the very bottom of my heart for coming on here and sharing yourself, your personal and your professional self, your whole self with us today. Even those earlier questions, delving into who you are, what lights you up. I really appreciate the humanness that you've brought to this really important area, burnout and passion fatigue with our teachers, who are so vital in this world. Not because they are teachers, they, like you said, because they're humans, but they're so vital to us here on this earth.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you for having me on here, Shannon. And thank you. I can't tell you how much your book has helped me so much, because it's a deeper level of insight, and it's also incredibly practical. So it's really helped me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been helpful. The more books out there and the more, stories that are shared and the wisdom that's come from it, it just, will help so many. So yeah, I'm grateful that we both put our books out there. It's fantastic. Yes. And anyone else who's listening and thinking that, put it out there. Put it out.
Definitely.
Do it. So yeah, thank you so very much, Rowena. Yeah.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Me again. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of my Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. I do hope that you have gained some insight, wisdom, or taking away something from this episode that is helpful for you with wherever you're at in your burnout journey, or helping others with. Please also reach out. I'd love to hear from the listeners, the viewers, to find out what you're finding helpful, maybe what you still would like to know. So please don't hesitate to follow, subscribe, comment, review, like, shoot me an email. I have my details in the show notes. And if you are in need of services around burnout and you are an Australian citizen, I, in my business, Burnout Psychology Support, do offer group and individual services, telehealth, as well as in-person in Brisbane. So again, check out the show notes. I have my contact details, but the best thing to do is jump on my website at www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. And just a reminder, of course, to reach out for personalized help. This podcast, whilst we strive to deliver information that can be supportive and educational for you, it is not tailored to meet your personal needs. And burnout is very individualized in terms of what gets us into burnout and what helps support us in getting out. So please do seek professional support. And I think that is it for me to share with you. Thank you once again, and take care of you. Bye for now.